top story up on Infowars.com. It's got links to the mainstream newspapers in Missouri. I'm going to cover it later in the next hour. And it just says the National Guard trains to take on the U.S. militia. High treason, ladies and gentlemen. Northcom openly announces in the Army Times they're preparing major combat brigades to, quote, engage the American people, including state governors. And that's the same thing the John Warner Defense Authorization Act says. Now, anybody who lives in the real world and understands history, the hair on the back of your neck should be standing up. But you see, it's not just the government that's corrupt and rancid. It's the American people. We were once the smartest and best and toughest. I mean, all those cliches were true. But it's probably been 100 years since we were anything close to those ancestors. And now we're a bunch of showboats, a bunch of posing, preening peacocks who like to act like they're tough and act like they're informed and act like they're involved. But in reality, it's a bunch of cowards that'll go along with anything. And so the word went out to the vultures of the planet. This is the place to pick the people's bones. This is where they'll put up with anything, as long as you wrap it in the American flag. You can shove a shotgun in their mouth and pull the trigger as long as the shotgun is red, white, and blue, and they'll thank you for blowing their brains out. Now, I know there's still a lot of good people in this nation, and the New World Order global crime syndicate's taken over on the planetary scale, so there's really nowhere to run. So we got to stand here and fight, ladies and gentlemen. But on average, 640,000 jobs are being lost every month for the last 8 months straight. 600,000+ people a month are losing their jobs. It's accelerating now. Real inflation's above 15%. Real unemployment is now above 20%. And it's only going to get worse. There's no cavalry coming over the hill. The government wants to make the depression as bad as possible. They want to bankrupt you. They want to make you dependent on them. They want to get control of you. It's in all the IMF and World Bank documents. They've done it to third world country after third world country. You know, you like to shake your finger when you're in a third world country. Nicaragua, El Salvador, Argentina, areas in Asia. You like to shake your finger and say, look at these homeless people everywhere. Look at these poor people. Why don't they do something for themselves? Well, see, their corrupt leaders were bought off by foreign offshore banks that signed agreements with the leaders that they were not to pay the loans back that were made up out of fiat money to begin with, backed up by U.S. taxpayers, and that they were then to hand over the entire infrastructure to the people. You see, the elites want you to be bankrupt and poor as a tool of control, as a tool of bondage. As State Department Memorandum 200 clearly states, declassified in 92, written by Henry Kissinger in 1973, they have to use war and famine and poverty to reduce the world's population. And their number one target is the West. Now, they've had trouble killing off the third world. Its numbers are growing. But the West is dying. The world average for the West, that counts Japan, they've got a Western death trend. For every 2 people, 2 parents, for every 2 adults, for every 2 baby boomers, they're having 1.3. That's the world average in the first world. So see, 2 people becomes 1.3. Our cultures are dying. It's a bunch of lackadaisical, smart-mouth know-it-alls who don't even have an idea. So selfish that they would allow themselves to be sterilized by the plastic products they drink water out of. They would allow themselves to be sterilized by the sodium fluoride in their drinking water. They would allow themselves to be sterilized and brain damaged by the mercury in their vaccines, and they wouldn't even stop because they were too lazy to even save their own lives. So I want to ask you, why is the 4th of July important? What do those fireworks symbolize? They symbolize warfare. They symbolize mortar shells exploding in the air. But, the West is like a big rotten dead animal. It just has to be drug off into the ditch and buried, basically. That's what you want. It's what you get. The bankers, you can believe all their lies. You can believe in hope. They're going to grind you under their feet. They're going to stomp your brains out. They're going to push you and squeeze you and bankrupt you and take your farms and your ranches and your homes. And so many of you are so cowardly. You will engage in mental gymnastics. You will make excuses for the system, and you'll go join the youth brigades and the forced labor brigades, and you'll go to work at the corporations that live off government contracts, and our whole economy is converting from industry and manufacturing and farming to tattletale squads and different government jobs and government-funded jobs, and everything's converting to police state. That's our new economy, and that's our new religion. That's what's worshipped. And our whole economy is being turned into a Pentagon murder grid, a control grid, a cashless society control grid, a technological enslavement panopticon to totally annihilate our society. And we're just incrementally introduced to the new level of the matrix every month, every year. As the intensifying corruption just expands, you're all good little mind slaves. You make the excuses. You rationalize. You're caught in that trance. You're caught under that spell where you just can't get out of it like the frog in the boiling water. Because you're not a slave. You're not going to admit you're a slave. You're going to rationalize. You're going to make excuses. You're going to believe in the false left-right paradigm. You're going to watch your 4.5 hours of TV a day. But I want to ask those of you out there that do love liberty, that do love freedom, that do know the Bill of Rights and Constitution has been completely butchered from pillar to post. What are you going to do to stop this? What are you going to do to fight this? What are you going to do to speak up against this system? Because I know this, the enemy will give us no quarter. They're not going to back off. They're not going to quit. They're not going to stop pushing. They're only going to go and push harder and harder and harder. They have created a banking black hole of fiat currency and debt that was impossible to get out of the day they set it in motion. It is a worldwide Ponzi scheme, but when the Ponzi scheme pops, that's when the elite get the real power because everything implodes into their police state hands. Northcom admits they've been preparing for 10 years for the collapse of society. Northcom wasn't set up in 2002. Homeland Security wasn't set up in 2002. It was set up in the early 90s. You can go pull up Bill Clinton's speeches talking about it. All of this has been a master plan. Just like the CIA has taken down hundreds of third world countries, they're taking us down now. They work for offshore banks. They work for foreign corporations. These elites don't care about you in the red, white, and blue. They only wrap themselves in that so you'll stand down. That's their camouflage while they run over you. These are ruthless, cold-blooded world conquerors using financial systems to blast out economies and get people under their control and domesticated and dependent on them. And if they can't do that, they'll fund terror organizations and revolutionary groups in your country to overthrow you, or they'll hire your military to overthrow you, or they'll come in and bombard your nation and blow its infrastructure out and then sit back for 15 years waging siege on your nation till millions of your people starve to death. Then they'll come in and take over. We're facing cold-blooded killers. At least people out there can wake up and face how much trouble we're in, but you won't because you want to be slaves and bankrupt homeless. Okay? Get what you want then.